Right, okay. So on the top of Lamed Hey and Aleph,
Right at the top where
we had a question that was posed by Rav Rabin, asked the question of Rava as to whether if a person asers their loaf of bread, kikari alecha, on another person, moving prohibits it to Shimon, and then he gives it to Shimon. So when he gives it to Shimon, do we say no? It was only prohibited when it was Ruvain's. He said my loaf of bread. Now he gave it to Shimon, so maybe it's not prohibited anymore, or is it still prohibited? So Rava said that he thought it still was prohibited. So now we're going to ask Akasha on Rava, who said it was prohibited. Esvei Amalo Ashileni Paraskot. Ruvain said to Shimon, please loan me your cow. Amalo Konam Parashani Kanoilach or Shani Hanalach Nixai Elachem Yeshli Para Elazu. So Shimon says that this is only Ruvain had asked it based on whether the para was available. And Shimon says my para is not available because in fact, because I only have this cow. I don't have any other cow. And to emphasize my point, I'm going to prohibit you from having any hana from either my cow or any of my nechasim if I have any other cow besides this one. This is how I'm emphasizing my point, that I don't have any other cows. That's why I can't lend it to you. Nishli paralazu. Ashulene kardumach. Or Ruvain says to Shimon, I want to borrow your hatchet. So I'm alone. Kodam Kardum. So Shimon says the same thing. I am going to prohibit like Hekdesh this hatchet, Li, Shieshli, Shani Kanali, Nixi Alai, Meshli Kardum Elazet, where and similarly I'm going Nixi Alaya. Similarly I'm going to prohibit all of my possessions upon you. If I have any hatchet other than this one, I can't loan it to you, I can't lend it to you, because I don't have any other hatchet. And him says Shieshlo. But it turns out that he does have another cow, or he does have another hatchet. So b'chayev aser. So while he's still alive, while Shimon is still alive, Reuven's not allowed to gain any benefit from the cow or the hatchet or Shimon's other possessions. However, if Shimon dies, or the shenasnalo, it could be, it's an unusual. We're not talking about women here; we're talking about men. Sometimes they shenasnalo. So Pashas is that this really should be a chiyuv. Shenitna lo b'matana. If the cow or the hatchet was given, thank you, to Reuven as a gift, raise a mutter, so then Reuven would be allowed to partake of it. So this appears to be a kasha to Rava, who says that even when the item is given over, if Reuven had prohibited his items upon Shimon, so when the item is given over, it remains prohibited to Shimon. Here it appears that it would not be prohibited to the other party. So Amravacha Breit Rabika, Shenitna lo, since we already conjugated the word Shenasna as Shenitna, it says Shenitna is an unusual word. If it was really a Shimon who was giving the hatchet or the cow directly to Reuven, it should have said Shenasan lo. The fact that it was stated in the passive form, Shenitna lo, it was given to him, it sounds like it was through a third party. That first Shimon gave it to Levi, and then Levi gave it to Reuven. So once he gave it to Levi, so then it already went completely out of Shimon's possession, and then Reuven would be allowed to have enough. But if Shimon would give it directly to Reuven, that would be a problem. Shenitna lo ayideyakim. Some of Ravashi dekanami tiktani shenitna lo, and Ravashi says, yeah, because that's actually what it says. If loktani shenas nolo, it doesn't say shenas nolo, it says shenitna lo. Now, of course, we don't have nekudos in our Gemara, so we have o shenas nolo, but we're reading it as a shenitna lo. So the Ran says on that dekanami. That they understood that they're supposed to read it with a chirik, even though if you have a Gemara without the kudos, there's no distinction in terms of writing shenasno or writing shenitna. So I'm explaining, well, if it was written in the feminine tense, so that would seem in the feminine form, that would seem to indicate that it was shenitna, that it was given passively. So by Minei Rav asked the question of Rav Nachman.
Amen.
He asked the question. What's the question? Sheyesh meila bekonama. So lo, is there meila? Do we say that since the form, the lashon prohibiting an item on somebody else, say konam davar zeh alayach, that I'm making this like hekdesh? So then do we really treat it like hekdesh? So if the person who's not allowed to get enough derives enough, he's guilty of me'ilam. He did it for shogeg. He would have to bring a korban asham. He would have to pay back the full value plus a chomesh. Do we apply all of those rules or not? We apply the rules of me'ilam. So Amalei, he did it for Mesa to get malchus. So Amalei tanitua. So he says, well, when we were talking about a person having an aveda returned to him, if the person who lost the aveda was not allowed to derive a benefit from the person who returned the aveda, so then when he wanted to pay the person for returning the aveda, and the person who returned it, the maxir, refused, so he said that the one who was the Bala Aveda has to take that money that he otherwise would have had to pay for the one who returned the Aveda, and he has to pay that money to Hekdesh. Malcolm Shnolin Alaskar, Tipolana Hekdesh. He has to give the money to Hekdesh. It didn't say he takes the money and he throws it into the Yamamelech, into the Salt Sea. Why does it say into the Dead Sea? Why does it say that he gives it to Hekdesh? Just to teach you that it's treated like Hekdesh. L'meimaki Hekdesh. Ma Hekdesh yesh bo me'ilah. To teach you that it has the same din as hekdesh, just like a regular consecrated item would be subject to me'ilah, so to an item that became prohibited to somebody because the owner said konam davar zelayach would also be subject to me'ilah. We say this is actually a machlokas tanoim, ketanai konam kikazu hekdesh. The person said this, a loaf of bread is going to be hekdesh, the achla, and he didn't restrict it to any person. He said it's hekdesh to the whole world. Nobody's allowed to eat this loaf of bread, but then he ate the loaf of bread. Either he ate it or somebody else ate it. So then we say there was actual me'ilah. Since it's prohibited to everybody like hekdesh, so therefore it's subject to the normal rules of hekdesh, with a kedushas damim, that you would be allowed to redeem it. However, if he says kikozu alai hekdesh, if he just says that this loaf of bread is prohibited to myself, like it's hekdesh, ve'achlahu, and then he ate it, so then he is guilty of me'ilah, but if his friend eats it, he didn't prohibit it upon his friend like hekdesh, so his friend would not be guilty of me'ilah, because the fact that it's not prohibited to everybody, so it doesn't have the full-fledged status of hekdesh, and therefore it's not subject to redemption, but it is subject to me'ilah. Rabbi Meir, so Rabbi Meir says that once you prohibited something like hekdesh, you say konam or resa hekdesh, so kike hekdesh. So then, according to Rabbi Meir, there would be me'ilah. There would be me'ilah bekonamos, right? And he used the lashon of konam, right? Konam. So the Chachamim disagree. So according to this machlokes tanaim, it seems that according to the Chachamim, we don't say that if someone said konam kikozu hekdesh, if somebody said that I'm going to prohibit this item as a konam like hekdesh, that it would be subject to me'ilah, but nonetheless, the Ran says that the halakha is like Rabbi Meir, because elsewhere, Masechah Shavuos, when this machlokes is recorded, it's recorded with Rabbi Meir's shita switched around to the Chachamim shita, and the Chachamim shita switched around to Rabbi Meir's. So it turns out that it's the Chachamim who yesh me'ilah b'konamas, and furthermore, it's supported by our Mishnah, our Stam Mishnah over here, that uses the lashon of tipol hana lehekdesh. And therefore, the conclusion is yesh me'ilah b'konamos. So and then he says, I have a suffix. Usually, in the case of me'ilah, after an item has been misappropriated, so then it automatically becomes chulin once again, becomes converted to be secularized once again, deconsecrated. So do we say the same thing with respect to if there be a violation with respect to an item on which there was a neder made through the word konam? Would it become deconsecrated once a person received enough from it? So he says that I have a suffix about, I'm not sure. So Amalei Ravacha Breda Ravavya the Ravashi. Ravacha asked Ravashi.
And then that be over.
Well, that's the question. So the question is, if he would be nene again, would be over on the neder, would be over on me'ilah or not? So he leaves that as a suffix. So Ravacha asked Ravashi the following question: Kari alecha v'nasn lo b'matana mimal. If a person says, my loaf of bread is prohibited to you, and now Reuven says to Shimon, and now Reuven gives the loaf of bread to Shimon as a matana. So who is guilty of me'ilah? Mimal. Limo nosa, no saying, alo asiva aleh. You can't say that the one who gave it over is going to be guilty because it wasn't prohibited upon him. That's how the Ran proves that this Gemara seems to be a contradiction to the ruling of the Rambam, who said that the one who gives it over is the one who would be guilty of lo yachel dvaro. So he says, but this appears clearly not to say that. So limo mekabel, is the one who received it. Is he going to be guilty of Me'ila? He's only receiving something.
Mhm.
Remember, Me'ila is typically a case where it's B'shogeg. So he's only receiving it based on it being a davar mutter. Otherwise, he has no interest in receiving it. Yaakov the Amar, he could say, Hatera be'isi, surah be'isi, that I was only interested in receiving this item, B'toras heter, as something that's permissible. If it turns out that it was prohibited to me, it was consecrated, I didn't have an interest in receiving it. So Amalei, so he responded, Rabashi responded, Mekabamo. The truth is that the one who received it is the one who's guilty of Me'ila, but not right away when he receives it, because right away when he receives it, he really didn't have an interest in being Mekabel, something that he'd be over on. So we say, okay, you're not over, you get to have it. But it is something that was a consecrated item, so he's going to be guilty of the Chashiyotzi when he uses it for something else. If he gives it to somebody else, he uses it to buy an item, to barter an item. So at that point in time, he's going to be guilty of Me'ila. Shekola Motzi Mos Hekdesh L'chulin, Kesava Shachulinu. If somebody takes a money or a consecrated item, which is basically Hekdesh, it's Hekdesh as far as he's concerned, because it was prohibited upon him. He thought that it was deconsecrated, but it turned out it was consecrated. Moel, so just like in a normal case, a Gizber or somebody else could be Moel with respect to consecrated items when they use it for some other purpose. They're a Shiyotzi. Abzeh Moel, so too, when this person is going to transfer it for some other purpose, he's going to be guilty of Me'ila. That brings us to Lamed Ham and base. Okay. Mishnah says, that somebody who is not allowed to confer a benefit upon another person, Ruvain is prohibited from conferring a benefit upon Shimon. Shimon's not allowed to receive a benefit from Ruvain. He's the mudar, and Ruvain is the madir. Despite the fact that Ruvain is not allowed to confer a benefit, he is allowed to separate truma from Shimon's possession on Shimon's behalf and his maisros. Ledaito, if Shimon had authorized it. And he can also sacrifice for him korbanos that he or his wife are obligated to bring, like a kan with shtei torim, which have to be brought if a wife gave birth. Umalamdo medrash, and he can also teach him, because teaching Torah is something that's supposed to be for free. Umalamdo medrash halachos v'agados or lo yalamdenu mikvah, but he's not allowed to teach him Torah shebektav. He can't teach him to lane. About Malaminu is banav es benosav mikvah, but he can give bar mitzvah lessons to his sons, and he can teach his daughters Torah shebektav as well. So he So the Gemara asks the question. So this is all going to be explained in the Gemara, but we understand that there's a basic principle that the Ryan articulates: the mitzvahs lavle hanos nitnu. That when it comes to the mitzvah, like for example, teaching the medrash or Gemara and so forth, so it's you're doing a mitzvah by teaching, and that's not something which is considered intrinsically a hana, because mitzvahs lavle hanos nitnu. The Gemara asks, when you have a kohen who offers a korban that somebody is bringing, let's say that somebody is obligated to bring a korban, asham or something like that. So is the kohen considered to be an agent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or is he considered to be an agent of the owner? Hani kohani shluchei didanavu. Are the kohanim the agents? Are we the agents of the 9 kohanim or shluchei dishmaya? Or are we the kohanim? Speaking for my tribe, are we considered to be agents of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How does that work? So the Ran says we already resolved this issue. In the Maseches Kiddushin, Rav Huna concluded that shluchei derachmana ninu. Because it doesn't make sense that this korbanos, the avoda, the korbanos, can't be performed by a Yisrael, and if they can't perform it, then they can't really appoint a shliach to perform something that they can't do. So that shows that a kohanim are shluchei derachmana. But nonetheless, says the Ran, we want to see whether we can bring some sort of a raya from our Mishnah as well with respect to this proposition. So l'may nafkamina, the mudar hana. The nafkamina would be for a mudar hana, whether somebody who's a Shimon who can't derive benefit from Ruvain because of a neder, whether there be an exception. Yamis the shluchei didan habu. If we say Ruvain the Kohen is a shliach of Shimon, hamahani leva asa, so he couldn't bring Shimon's korban because he's providing hana to him as his shliach. Yamis shluchei deshmaya. But if we say that Ruvain the Kohen is considered to be an agent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so then Shari, then it would be okay, because he's not doing Shimon's bidding, he's doing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's bidding. So what's the halacha? So Tashma. So let's take a look at our Mishnah. Our Mishnah D'Tanan says, Makriv umakriv alav kinei zavin mechulei. Reuven was not allowed to confer benefit upon Shimon. Since he's a Kohen, he can offer his kabbalah. So Yamish Sukkei Didan Kamahanile. If we say that Reuven is the shliach of the people, in this case the Shimon, so he's conferring a benefit upon him. So we say no, but according to this response by the anonymous responder, really the Mishnah is not such a good proof because it shouldn't have been restricted to things related to Zavin and Zavos and Yoldos. Zavin, Zavos, and Yoldos, what do they have in common? The Mechusrei Kippurim. The Mechusrei Kippurim, meaning that the purpose of the korban is just to enable them to eat korbanos, but it's not for the purpose of a kapara. It's all kinin. It says makriv. It should have said makriv alav korbanos. It should have just said that it can be makriv the korbanos that they have to bring. But the only korbanos that we're permitting over here are the korbanos, the chatos, and the ashamos of the mechusrei kippurim, and the mechusrei kapara shiny. Mechusrei kapara are a different story because that you can do without the person's authorization altogether. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, since it's not for a kapara, it's just to enable the person to eat a korban. So therefore, we're more lenient in terms of our standard. Hakot tzrichin das, if it was for any other korban, you would need the person's authorization for a kapara, but not for mechusrei kapara, which just means that they can't eat kosher. Mechusrei kapara, a woman gave birth, she needs to bring 2 turtle doves so that she'd be allowed to eat a korban. Mechusrei kapara, shrei adam maybe korban abanav abanosav aketanen. When it comes to mechusrei kapara, you can even bring a korban for a young child. Shenemar zos taras hazav. It says that you can bring a korban. Somebody who's a zav who has an emission that comes from their aver. It's not semen, but it's another weird type of emission. So bein gadol, bein katan, a father can bring it for a child, even if he's only a katan. Even though he doesn't have das. So since it doesn't require das, it's not considered to be an agency of any sort. Elamiata, the Rabbi Yochanan. But if that's the case, if Rabbi Yochanan learns that when it says Zos Taras in connection with the Mechusrei Kapara, that it comes to include even a minor child. So what do you do with Zos Taras Hayoledis, we go there? That's also Mechusrei Kippurim. And Zos Taras, according to him, it should come to include even a katana. It comes to include something more than the regular case. But a katana doesn't give birth. He said, you'd have to learn ben katana, ben gedola. You could bring the korban yoledis even for a young girl who gave birth. But katana bas leiti. Since when does a katana give birth? We have an explicit statement of Rav Nachman that we'll see that indicates that it's not a possibility for a katana to give birth, at least not to give birth and to survive. She might give birth, but she's not going to survive. Katana bas lady, v'hatani v'abebai kamei the Rav Nachman. Bebai says taught in front of Rav Nachman, and because Bebai, excuse me, shalosh nashim misham shel spermoch. There are 3 women who are allowed to use a diaphragm, some sort of a cloth. You might loosely define as a diaphragm. Was probably closer to the vaginal surface than our diaphragms. Our diaphragms are probably less problematic, but this would really interfere with the flow of the zera during intercourse. So it would be something that would generally be prohibited as wasting seed. But we say that there are 3 women, the way Rashi learns, who are permitted to use a moch, katana, umumberes, umenika. A katana, a young girl, a muberes, a pregnant lady, and a menika, and a nursing woman. Katana shemet tisabe b'tamus. And the reason why we don't allow it for katana is because we're worried that she's going to get pregnant, she'll die. So that we see it's not viable for a katana to give birth. So we say no. As far as what Rabbi Yochanan would include in the catch-all phrase of Zos Toras, when it comes to Zos Toras Hayoledis, it wouldn't be a katana, it would be a shota. Ben pikachas ben shota, meaning that the man married a woman, then she became deranged, she had postpartum or whatever. Now she's a shota. Even though she's a shota, she doesn't have any das at all. He'd be allowed to bring a korban on her behalf. She can order maybe korban alishto shota k'divrei Rabbi Yehuda, as Rabbi Yehuda says. The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer, as Rabbi Yehuda has a case where some of the words may be missing in the text, or at least according to the Ran. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Adam maybe korban ashir alishto. Let's say that the woman didn't have any money. Of course, she didn't have any money because kol shekansi isha kana baila. All of her assets go to her husband, so she doesn't have money, and the husband, however, isn't ashir. So then we say that when the husband brings the korban on her behalf, so she's treated like an ashiva because of the husband, and therefore he has to bring a fancy schmancy korban, a korban ashir on her behalf. But that's only while they're still married. Other maybe korban ashir al alishto, v'chol korbanos shechayeves, and any korbanos which she would be obligated to bring. Shekach kosev la, because this is what he writes for her. And I have responsibility for anything that you're obligated to do from beforehand, meaning from before we got divorced. So the missing words over here are that therefore, if he did divorce her, Rabbi Yehuda says that he would not be chayev anymore to bring the korban because this is a part of the conditions of the kesuba, that she would forgive any of these responsibilities that related to anything before the divorce once they get divorced. And now the question is, so why are we picking on Rabbi Yehuda? He's not speaking about a shota per se, but it says that the Ran, we're picking on with the reason why we're utilizing Rabbi Yehuda as a source is because it says in general, then Adam maybe korban ashir al alishto, that a person brings a korban for his wife, so that would imply for any wife, even if the wife was a shota. And then the continuation of this brisa, according to the Ran, is then it says Amar Rabbi Yehuda, the fikach in patra. Therefore, if he divorces her, he's no longer obligated because of the fact that it says the ksuba that he's only responsible for that which occurred. He's only responsible for anything while he's still married, but once they get divorced, then he's not responsible for any obligations that had existed prior to the divorce. But we see that therefore from here, that what we would include is that a man could bring korbanos for his wife was a shota, but it doesn't come to include a katan in this case. Yeah.